good. Let me ask you a question. Are you making any new friends at school? You making new friends? How do you make friends? You know, how do you, Abby, let me know.
By meeting new people, and being nice to them.
Being nice to them. Yeah. It's important to have friends at school, isn't it? I mean, I remember when the teacher would give us homework and I didn't know how to do it. So I always asked a friend, how do you do this? Can you help me with my homework? It's good to have friends, and it's good to have friends because, you know, sometimes you're feeling sad and you need somebody to talk to, you need somebody to encourage you. So we all need friends. And to make friends, sometimes you just start talking to people. Maybe you're playing on a sports team and you can make friends by being on the sports team, and there's all kinds of different ways of making friends. Friends are important in school, but you know what? Friends are important in building a church too. I want to read you something from the Bible, from the book of 1 Corinthians. This is from the Apostle Paul. He says, to the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, so as to win those under the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I may save some. What he's talking about there is just accommodating people. And it's just like Abby says, accommodating people just means to be friendly, to be kind to people, to win friends. And that's what the Apostle Paul was doing. Now, who was Paul? You guys remember who Paul was? He's a missionary. He's a missionary. He started out in Jerusalem, and he traveled all over the known world. And he's writing this morning, we're reading a writing from his in the book of Corinthians. Corinthians is a church in the city of Corinth. Corinth is in the country of Greece. Does anybody know where Greece is? It's in Europe, in the southern part of Europe. And it's not in the southern part, it's on the Isthmus of Corinth. You know what an isthmus is? Anybody know what an isthmus is? An isthmus is just a piece of land that divides two great bodies of water. So they call it the Isthmus of Corinth, and they had the Isthmian Games. It was an Olympic event, and all the Greek people would come there, and they would participate in these Olympic events. And Paul got to know all kinds of people from all parts of Greece, so that he was able to befriend them, accommodate them. But not only that, he was a missionary from Jerusalem. He started in Jerusalem, but he went all through Turkey. He was in Malta, an island. He was in what we call Syria right now. He was all over, and he knew the cultures of all those people, and he could speak so many different languages. We know that he could speak Greek, and he could probably speak Latin, which was the language of Rome, and we knew that he could speak Hebrew. And he says to the people of Corinth one time that he said that I speak more languages than any of you. And it's important. He knew the languages of these people. He knew the culture of these people. And so he was able to accommodate them, be kind to them, understand their culture, and love them no matter what. And he says in the passage today, to the Greeks I became like a Greek, and to the Jews, I become like a Jew. You see, the Greeks were different than the Jews. The Jews, when they would eat, they eat only certain foods, like they couldn't eat pork or ham. And so when he was with the Jews, he wouldn't eat pork or he wouldn't eat ham. They had certain ways that they would wash their hands before they ate the food. And when he ate with Jewish people, he would wash his hands and do the things that Jews do. But when he was with the Greeks and the Greeks ate ham, well, he would eat the ham. He would do anything he can. He was accommodating to people. He was, like, as Abby said, trying to be kind to people, show love to them, so that eventually he could win them to Jesus. If you're kind to people, then they'll maybe relate to you and maybe listen to what you say. So he was being kind, he was accommodating to people so that he could win them to Jesus, so he could talk to them about Jesus. Isn't that what we were doing yesterday at the Fall Fest? We were accommodating people. Now, some of us don't like basket auctions. I'm sure there's a lot of people here that like baskets. Some of us don't particularly care for basket auctions, but we do it anyway. Because at basket auction, it brings people in. You put up the sign saying, we're going to have a basket auction, well, the whole county's going to be here. And people just love basket auctions. And they love to get something for free. Hobart Brown and I were in the store getting some ice, and we saw some guy standing there and said, well, you know, we got some free chili, and we got some free hamburgers and free hot dogs down at our church just a couple blocks from. And right away, yeah, we'll be there. because they love getting stuff for free. Free chili, free hot dog. And see what we're doing? We're accommodating people. We're showing them love, accepting them no matter what. You come in here and we're going to give you a free hot dog, a free hamburger, free chili, no matter what, so that we can just show them love. And when we show them love, then we have an opportunity to talk to them about Jesus. And that was that's really the whole purpose of the Fall Fest, was to talk to people about Jesus. We could invite them to our church, or, we sit and talk with them and say, where are you from? And are you going to church? Are you interested in church? And they might say, yes, I go to this church or that church. And you might hand them a little tract telling them about how to get saved, or telling them all about Jesus. And that's the whole purpose of the Fall Fest. So we're accommodating people. We're showing them the love of Jesus, teaching them how they can know they have a relationship with God. So there's a lot of people that aspire to know God. They seem to know that God exists, and they seem to love God in some way. Did you know? I don't know. Maybe you guys didn't know this, but did you know that the Pope came to America last? Was anybody aware of that? I don't know. Yeah, he was all over the place. President Obama invited 70,000 of his closest friends to come to the White House and come see the Pope. The Pope was just, everybody was just enamored with the Pope because the Pope was here. And he went to Philadelphia, he was in Washington, he went to New York, and he was in Central Park in New York. Wow, can you imagine that? And one of the news commentators from a conservative news station was there doing the announcing, and she was just beside herself. This was a very conservative news announcer. She was just giddy. She said, "Oh my gosh, it's like I won the lottery. He could have been coming down any street in Central Park. Nobody told us where he was coming, and he came down the street that I was there. Oh my gosh!" And she was just so thrilled, and people were just thrilled to see the Pope, because the Pope to them somehow represents God, or he represents the Bible, or represents, he somehow in some way represents God, and they see a need to know who God is, and they want to know more about God, and it fulfills a need. And the Roman Catholic Church is a little different than ours. They're more formal, and when the Pope said his mass, they call it a mass, but they get together, and when they meet on Sunday morning, they call it a mass. And so they met for mass, and they had hundreds and hundreds of these priests in these long white robes, and they had a white hat on, and people thought, oh, it just represents God. And you go into a Catholic church and you see the candles, and you see all the religious paraphernalia, and it just somehow makes people feel, oh, I'm so close to God, and this is so wonderful. And if you go into some of the Roman Catholic churches, they're huge. Like if you go to Europe sometime and you go to some of those great cathedrals in Europe, they just go on and on up into the sky. And the reason they're built that way, because it inspires people. It inspires people to love God and to know God. And so a lot of people think that's the way you come to God. You come to God by spiring cathedrals and men dressed in robes and a lot of religious paraphernalia. But I wonder what Jesus says about coming to God. There's a story in the book of John about Jesus. Jesus meets this Samaritan woman. And if you guys know anything about the Samaritans, the Jews hate the Samaritans, and the Samaritans hate the Jews. Well, Jesus was in Samaria one time, and he saw a Samaritan woman at a well. And he started talking to her. And he asked her if she would just get him a cup of water. And she looked at him and said, "How can you, a Jew, even talk to me?" And Jews don't have any relationships with Samaritans. How can you, what gives? And he began to talk to her about the water and the living water and what it represents. And he began to talk to her about worshiping God. And she said to him, "Well, we Samaritans, we worship on this mountain in Samaria." They call it Mount Gerizim. It's a place where the Samaritan people built a temple, and they worship God in Samaria. She says, "Well, we worship God in our mount in Samaria, and you worship God in Jerusalem in a temple." You know what the name of the temple is? What's the name of that temple? Zerubbabel? Zerubbabel's temple. You remember the story of Zerubbabel? Well, that's the temple she was talking about. She says, "You guys worship God down in Zerubbabel's temple, and we worship God up in Samaria. And Jesus said to her, there's a time now that people will come and worship God in spirit and in truth. What did he mean by that? When God will be worshiped in spirit and in truth. What Jesus is saying is you don't come to God, you don't have to come to God with a long robe on. You don't have to come in a cathedral. There's probably a lot of people that will look at this church and say, this really isn't a church. It's too small. We have no cathedral. The people aren't dressed right. But Jesus is saying you'll worship God in spirit and in truth. If you're going to worship God, you're going to have to worship God through Jesus Christ. That's when your worship is acceptable. You've got to have access to God through Jesus. It's not how you dress, it's what's in your heart. Do you love God? Do you love your fellow man? And do you believe that Jesus died for your sins? That's how you know that your worship is acceptable to God. And that's what we try to do here in our church. We accommodate people. We welcome anybody in here. And no matter what kind of troubles they have, or what kind of a past they have, they're welcome in here. And you don't have to dress in a fancy way. You can dress in shorts, do whatever you want to do, as long as your heart is right with God, as long as you're coming to God through Jesus Christ. We don't take an offering either. We got a little box back there. If you want to give to the church, give to the ministry, there's a little box back there. But a lot of people are offended. They're put off by the passing of the plate. And there's a lot of abuse in churches and taking money. So we try to accommodate people and not try to jam the idea of you got to give money to this church, you got to do this, you got to do that. We want to be loving. We come to God through Jesus Christ, and that makes our worship acceptable to Him. So we try to accommodate people. You know, I think I like the Pope. I love my Roman Catholic friends, but I thought about this. Do you realize all the news about the Pope? The Pope was here in America. He had the ear of this entire country listening to him. Washington, Philadelphia, New York, every newscast carried every word he gave. And unfortunately, all he seemed to talk about, and maybe I got it wrong, but all he seemed to talk about was politics. What an opportunity to share the simple gospel message that we're all sinners, we're all fallen short of the glory of God, but by believing in Jesus Christ, we will have access to God. He had that opportunity for that clear message, and it was never given. Well, what we try to do in our church is we try to give the gospel in a very clear form, and we try to teach the Bible as accurately as we can. And we're not critical, we're not condemning Roman Catholics, and I'm not condemning the Pope in any way, shape, or form. He's a very nice man, but what an opportunity to share Christ, and it was all lost. What we believe here in our church, sort of our informal church motto is 1 Peter 2:5, that we're a priesthood of believers built upon living stones, brick, and we call it, in the Bible they call it, the church is being built by living stones, but we took the metaphor from that and built it into the idea of building a church brick by brick by brick, and we're building into people's lives. As a matter of fact, I designed a t-shirt a little while ago and took it to the guy to make a t-shirt with, and he never got back to me. So we're looking for a t-shirt with that logo, Brick by Brick Bible Church, faith alone in Christ alone. So this morning, I'm going to ask the elders to come forward, and we're going to partake of the Lord's Supper. And anybody who believes that Jesus died for their sins, no matter how young you are, no matter how old you are, it doesn't matter. If you truly believe that Jesus died for your sins, I welcome you to take communion with us this morning. And then after communion, we're going to sing some songs. And then I think I would like some interaction from you guys maybe about the Fall Fest, maybe about some of the things we're doing right, some of the things that we're doing wrong. We talked about accommodating people, and we want to talk about accommodating people, how we can make this church better, how we can make it more effective, and how we can win some people to Jesus, because that's what it's all about. So